Hey, it's Steve. Welcome back to Clear Direct. I have a week and a half until this airplane goes into paint, and I have still a lot left to do. If you saw my last video, you probably were laughing because if you're an experienced builder, you know I had a lot more than what I thought I had when I recorded that video. I pulled the plane out and did an update a couple days ago, but it was windy, so I'm going to go ahead and just re-record this video and give you guys an update on all that I've done in the last week and a half and what I've got left to do in the next week and a half. As always, there is a long form version of this video and a short form. Okay, let's get right into it. You can see we have a cowling. We've got a nice fitting cowling. In fact, it's fitting up a little too nice. And what I mean by that is my painter requires a 1/16 of an inch gap everywhere on the cowling, as well as on the aft side of the cowling. So he lent me this really cool tool. I'm not sure what we call it, but it's precisely a 1/16 of an inch thick. And essentially you just put it in the joggle and start sanding, and it's gonna leave the required gap. So I've got that left to do. Clearly I've got the spinner left to do. So I've got to put on the propeller, trim this out to be correct size, leave the correct size gap, and then install all the hardware. So there's nut plates that go around the edge of it. Dimple it so that it's clocked and indexed. And so I always put it back in the same direction, and that should be done. Trim up this and the aft edge. Oh, and then the engine heat exit or airflow exit right there. I was unsure about the dimensions. So there's a figure in the figures manual that says 11.5 inches forward of the aft side of the cowling. Well, I didn't know if that was forward of it before it was trimmed, because there was like 3 more inches back here. So I just went conservative and cut less and asked the question. And they got back to me with a really good answer. They said, hey, it's pretty much forward of the cowling. And if you need another measurement to back that up, measure 9 inches aft of the intake. And so that's going to put it right at about here. So there's clearly a lot more trimming I need to do to get that right sized. I've done a lot of talking about how I do not want cooling problems. So I'm going to make that large and in charge. Before we get into the belly fairings right there, let's stick with the cowling and check out this bad boy. So thanks so much to my friend Terry. He's an RV builder, you can tell, because he loves squeezing solid rivets. But it turned out so good. So I designed this door on Adobe Illustrator, sent it into Send, Cut, Send, and they produced it for me. I had a bunch extra made just in case. I bought this surplus latch from Aircraft Spruce, and I bought this no-show hinge. It's a lot more sturdy than the one supplied with the kit. And we got that all fitting great. So Terry is such a craftsman. He noticed that the hinge itself wasn't manufactured exactly perfectly, and it left a little bit of a gap up here. So he shimmed it and got it fitting awesome. And we got it trimmed, so there is a 1/16 gap before we riveted that. So that is done, and I'm really, really happy with that. Once this is all trimmed, then I'm gonna drill these holes out bigger and put in the quarter turn hardware. Let's get into the gear fairings. A lot more, as I mentioned, on the long form video. If this is the long form video you're watching, it'll be at the end of this little update. These are fitting great, and I'm really happy with how they are now, but you can see something that shouldn't necessarily belong. That wasn't a mistake. This could have gone inside, but fabrication and installing of it just made it easier to put it on the outside. Let me talk about what that is. There's one over there. There's also one back here. This one was concerning to me. A friend of mine who owns an experimental Rans S21 like mine, but the factory built it, he had cracking in this area. Why? Because there's a rivet nut where each of these screws go into. And this one seems fine to me because there's structure nearby it. There's structure right nearby this one too. Structure nearby this one. There's no structure nearby this. So this is just, I believe, 20,000. It may be 25,000, but I think it's 20,000 6061 T6 aluminum. And it's pretty floppy if you don't put a doubler. And so he had cracking, so he had to fix that. So in order to avoid that problem, I put in just a little doubler, as well as I predicted this one to be a little bit weaker as well, so I made one for there. Okay, but got them fitting really, really nicely. And again, this is on the bottom of the plane. It'll be painted in a dark color. I want it dark on the bottom of the plane just because of grease and oil. If it's white, it's going to show that a lot more readily. Okay, moving to the wing strut or lift strut fairings. Those are fitting really, really nicely. I cut this gap right here so that I could put it on and take it off without removing the wing strut. But it's a little unnerving taking it off and putting it on. So I don't know if I'm gonna, you know, cut out a little bit more, just because you have to really bend it in an awkward way to fit it over the lift strut and slide it up. But once again, there are rivet nuts securing each of these. I did not put in doublers for any of these. You know, they're pretty well secured by structure nearby. You have to really avoid hitting the ribs. The only one that could be potentially an issue is right here. So I'll just keep an eye on that and keep it inspected. Moving our way aft, here is the aft window. I've got this all final riveted in now, and I have a bead of silicone around it. So hopefully, in theory, it's waterproof. And I just left the masking on for the painter. So this is going to be IFR certified. IFR certification is good for 2 years, but if you have water in your static line, you need to drain it and break open the static lines. My understanding is that decertifies your IFR cert. And I plan on draining water, making sure there's no water on it, on every condition inspection that's annually. So I'm sourcing a drain to actually drain that without breaking the continuity of the IFR system. Okay, so more on that. You've seen the tail dragger handle. You've seen the Aerosport products, carbon fiber fairing. The nut plates are in there. The hardware is just there. That's just sitting there for right now. This tail is actually only just clecoed in, but it's important to get it in to do a couple of things. Mainly the horizontal, and let's start with the horizontal. Okay, first off, you'll notice the inspection plates are on top of the horizontal, and that's just because of the incidence adjusters and the mounting bolts are on top. And actually, it's really nice for ease of maintenance and install. But you can see let's start with the fairing. Okay, so this fairing, you have to kind of self-mold it, not mold it, but bend it. And that's pretty easy. Edmund Gill from Rands has some videos on how to do that, so I won't repeat that. The only issue here is that I don't know if I messed this up or the Rands instructions are incorrect, in that this should be a flush rivet. Okay, I can't just drill it out now and, you know, countersink into the spar and dimple the skin. That's staying a domed pulled rivet. So clearly I just drilled out part of the fairing, and now it's sitting nice and flush. Same thing on the other side. But if you're building a horizontal stab, heads up, take a look at where this is, right? So the rib outside from the middle to in, that should probably be a flush rivet. The incidence is adjusted, okay? So I have a Titan motor, so essentially all the way down, give it the most up authority that you can with a heavy engine. Okay, so the tail cone. We've got the tail cone here, much more on this tail cone in the long form edition, but yeah, nothing really to note here. Oh, yeah, the angle, that's important. So installing the elevator just to get that angle was a bit daunting, and I didn't do it. So I'll save it for the long form. I explain how I figured out the angle. Okay, the top fairing. This, you definitely do want to put the rudder in to get the spacing correct right here. I found that when I was initially fitting it up and not sure if I needed to do the rudder, and then once I put the rudder in, I was glad I did, because it was a little bit angled. It wasn't going to contact it, but Rands recommends 0.375, I believe, of an inch. I'm just inside of that. So it'll be a nice tight fit right here. And nothing too much else to note on this, other than it does get riveted in. And so I'm not riveting it in until, look at this, camera mounts before rivet. Camera mounts. Thank you so much to FlightFlix for sponsoring this episode and sponsoring me and giving me a bunch of mounts. So I have the freedom and flexibility to install these wherever I want to put not just GoPros, but also poles for 360 cam. So I have an idea of putting a pole forward and having a 360 cam up there and having a really cool, unique angle that I really haven't seen a lot on YouTube or Instagram. So the idea is to either use this one or a smaller one. This is pretty hefty. It's aluminum, so it's not too heavy. But put a couple nut plates in there so that I can take it off in day-to-day, but have provisions to easily mount my cameras, whether it be a GoPro or a pole for 360 cam there, as well as on the wingtips. Okay, once I get that riveted in, then on to, again, fitting up the cowling and the windscreen. So doors also, and then there's 3 more interior closeouts. So on station 3, this is station 3. So station 4 closeout's the big plastic piece right there. Station 3 closeout is right here, right over there to cover up the pulleys and pitot lines and electrical lines, flap lines, etc. And then 1 aluminum piece up here with the words experimental. I ordered an experimental sticker from Aircraft Spruce like 3 months ago, and they're still out of stock on that. I digress. Okay, that is the update. If this is the long form video, I'm gonna play a lot more data. And if anybody else is kind of doing this, here's my plans. For whatever that helps, you can feel free to pause it. If you see numbers, I tend to do things in millimeters. Call me socialist, whatever, but there it is. Okay, working on the spinner backing plate, I'm doing something a little bit different. So I'm installing the nut plates that eventually, obviously, will keep the spinner in place to the backing plate. And the instructions have you put this rivet, it's just a dome head 3/32 rivet in here, but they said countersink so the rivet heads are flush. Well, I don't have something to countersink so that it has a flat surface, right? I just have 120 and 110 degree countersink bits. So I upgraded to some 120 degree flush rivets. So I'm going to countersink each of these nut plate rivet holes to 120 degrees such that this will have a nice flush finish into the carbon fiber. If you're curious about what rivets these are, here you go. I get them from Hanson Rivet. They're from the 818. That's where I grew up, so I love it. And they're Pack 304s. Something that the instructions tell you to do that's really nice is they tell you to take a number 11 drill bit and just dimple the backing plate as well as the spinner right where they align up so that you don't forget how this lines up, because it is important. You got to have it clocked right. So hopefully I'll remember to tell my painter not to fill in that it's not an error. Keep that dimpled. Paint over it, but we'll always have a dimple and know how this lines up. Let's talk about a couple doublers I'm making for these guys. So a friend of mine, as I crawl under here, has a factory built, but an experimental. And I'm not sure how that works, but anyway, he didn't build it, but he was frustrated when, let's see, this nut plate produced cracks. So let me show you how this fits in, first of all, for context. So this is the left. This fits in roughly up here. Okay, with 5 rivet nuts. And the rivet nuts are simply through this like 20,000th skin. And it's okay if it's up against some structure, I feel like, okay? Whatever vibration is gonna be dampened by the structure nearby. This one's okay. This one's okay. I believe this one's okay. But the two the one that he had problems with was this one, and this one is by far just in a ocean of unsupported. I mean, look at that. So no wonder there's vibration, and this is a high vibration area, I would think, right behind the exhaust. So a lot of turbulence, a lot of vibrations from the engine. So these things, and it's right on the gear. So when you're landing, there's vibrations. So this is going to get beat to hell. So you can see already the doublers I've made. So this is, I don't know if it's 32 or 40,000th. I'll try to measure and update you. But I made this one here, and I made this one here. This one is going to go inside. Because it's easy to access. This one, however, is under the floorboard that I can't really access. You could probably slide it in, but aligning the holes, no thanks. So most 80% of it is going to be covered by this anyway. The only parts that's going to stick out is going to be up there. 2 rivets out there sticking out, and it's on the belly aft of everything, right? So no, up here, the only thing that'll stick out are the 2 rivet heads up here, but the doubler is going to be inside. Okay, so that's, I did that on both sides. There's that one on the right side, and then that one. So those are all fit up, match drilled, and the rivet nut's just hanging in there for alignment. That's where I used to start everything, and then I match drilled around it. So it's just loose in there. I'm gonna take everything out, deburr everything, and then put this one inside the aircraft, and then this one on the outside. And this one hopefully will hold. This one, if I were to do one more, I would do this one, because I mean, you saw before, right? Look at that. It does move. So I don't know. I just think it's close enough to structure that it won't move as much. And so this whole discussion starts a bigger conversation about weight versus strength. But my philosophy is, okay, what good is having a light aircraft, a high performance aircraft, if you're getting cracks all over the place? So I'm willing to sacrifice the weight. I should weight all this stuff. Maybe I will. No, I don't have a scale here. But I would be curious to see what I'm adding as far as weight. And it's right on the CG. It's just forward of the CG, which is fine, because I got actually a bunch of weight in the aft. So it's negligible, and I think it's going to serve me well and help avoid cracks in the future. So anyway, onward. Here's a cool shot. Something that I'm not sure about is in the instructions, I don't quote me on this distance, but I think it's 16.5. They say from the forward, but I think that distance is before you cut this edge. So it was clear back here. Like going 16.5 forward from here was like way up. I think that mark might be it. And it seemed like too much. So I don't know if this is too little or Goldilocks or what, but if anybody knows, you can reach out before I get this painted and I can cut some more. But got it final sanded, looks pretty good. I decided to just go on the outside. It's just so much easier, and there's such little what'll be noticed. Only again about like that, and then like that can be seen. And when I say be seen, from the underside. So yeah, easier. So the only thing I got to do left is take down, these are 40 thousandths, by the way. I'm fitting up the tail fairing on the top of the vertical, and I almost missed. In the plans, they say to put washers to space this rib from the top rib. And my only guess is just kind of as an afterthought to increase the spacing between the rudder. I had the rudder mocked up in place to ensure that I had the spacing correct. And it turns out I needed another washer in the aft to kind of push this up a hair. But let me talk to you about something that doesn't make sense to me. They say to use these washers. These are AN 960-10s, which are the thick versions of the 3/16 washer. And the rivet they say to use and the holes that are provided are, guess what, copper Glico number 30, which is an 1/8" rivet. So why do you want to shove an 1/8" rivet through a 3/16 hole? I don't like that. So what I'm doing is using, I had these zinc washers left over from body tab spacing on the fuselage. They're a 50 thousandth thickness. I primed them, and the rivet fits nice and snug in that 1/8" hole. And it's a wider diameter, which provides a lot more surface area in this area. So you can see right there, it's sticking out a little bit, but that's not going to interfere with the rudder. So I don't know, I just don't love it. And additionally, without those rivets in there, when you Cleco it in, it's rock solid. But now it's just a little bit more flimsy, as you can see. Now, I'm not super worried about that because it's going to get riveted in and it's going to be pretty rock solid. But that is one alteration I'm making. So you can see three here, and then there's 2 in between that hole right there. So let's see what else on this. To get the nose to fit in, I cut out a little notch so that this squeezes a little bit better, and this fits all the way to the front. Also, note that the plastic gets sandwiched in between these two right there, and that gets sandwiched. So when there's metal backing the rivet, you're good. But right here, that ends, and there's 5 rivets up here and 5 rivets over here that need little washers. So I'm just going to use some silicone sealant on the washer, Cleco them in, let them dry, and now they have a metal backing on that plastic. But that gets permanently installed. So I don't want to do that quite yet because I haven't yet placed some backing plates, some nut plates, 1/4 inch nut plates on the spar for camera mounts. So kind of briefing you, reading you into the program here. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a camera mount here with a pole out in front from my friend Ryan's Pro Rig company. Pro Rig, and all these are right here. So, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. There's power supplies, there's mounts. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then there's weatherproof USB ports. So I'm gonna be stoked to get these in there. Couple on the tail, and then the wingtips, and it's gonna be ready to rock and roll for a YouTube platform. All right, so fitting this up, ideally you'd put the elevator in place, but I just don't have an extra set of hands because you need at least 2 sets of extra hands to hold the elevator, and then you put an AN3 bolt through the hinge. And then the idea is, obviously you want to match this angle to the max down elevator deflection that you're going to have. Okay. So and the max down elevator deflection is 25 degrees. All right. So how do you get that? Is that 25 degrees? No, heck no. So what I did was I drew a reference line down the chord of the rib here, the end rib. I grabbed my digital protractor. Here, let's just do it. Boom. Okay, so this is your reference line. This will be 0. So you put it in there. I'm gonna do it one-handed, so I'm just gonna do it kind of rough. You line it up, hit reference to 0 it out. Close enough for demonstration purposes. And then the number I got is 19 degrees. We'll talk about how I got that here in a second. And so I fit this up to get just over 19 degrees, add in a little bit of slop because I don't have the rudder or the elevator in there. Okay, and then before I get to the 19 degrees discussion, let's talk a little bit about the fitment of this. So apparently you're gonna nut plate some strips in, or rivet some strips in here, I think, on the inside, and then the bottom, and then the other side, and then screws go in there. Okay, and then also you're gonna cut the notch for the bell crank right here. So the aileron bell crank is down here, push rod goes forward, and it can move in the slot. Okay, so let's show you. So I had to create a little bit of a bevel. Let's get a dark background right there, because look at this area right here. So it fits flush against here, but it wasn't fitting great. So I cut out a little notch right there so that now there's plastic contacting all points of metal, and it's a lot more secure. Hard to get in there with one hand, but anyway, so the 19 degrees, let's talk about that. assuming the elevator or the stabilizer is at 0 and at neutral elevator, that's at 0. Okay, but it's not at 0, right? The top of the elevator is 6 degrees down and the bottom of the elevator is 6 degrees up. Let's show you that. Okay, close enough, roughly 0. This is sitting flat on the floor, so about 12 degrees, yeah? 12 degrees, so +6, -6 from 0 chord. You agree? So at full down deflection, if that's 0, the center of the chord of the elevator is going to be down 25 degrees per the manual. Okay, so +6, -6, the top of the elevator will be pointing down 31 degrees. Bottom of the elevator will be 19 degrees. That's where I got this measurement. But again, airplane's at an angle, whatever. So the stabilizer is at its final location. Okay, so its bolts are in there and its incidence is adjusted. I've got a Titan motor, so the stabilizer essentially goes all the way down, which is another discussion about the fairing. So let me finish off. So if this is 0 and this is set, right, down for the bottom surface of the elevator is -19 degrees. That's why that's 19 degrees down. Okay, there's also going to be a gap in there, so there's some slop because I believe the elevator, the error is ±1 degree, so minus 25 degrees down, ±1 degree. So there's enough slop in there, so that should work great. Okay, so I've got the nut plates in here, as you can see, for the tail fairing, horizontal stabilizer fairing. 2 notes on this. One is at this angle of incidence, the fairing has to go from here all the way up to here, and so it's kind of a big angle. It's not bad, but it's just something to note. It would be nicer if, you know, if this was more in line with some of this skin, it would be a little bit smoother of a fairing. But that's okay, that's what the fairing does. It just smooths out the transition. This rivet, I don't know if I got this wrong. I'd have to look at the plans, but this particular rivet needs to be a flush rivet. So you can see this line, the fairing actually goes over this rivet right here and right here. So rather than drill it out and try to put in a flush rivet, because that would require me to countersink the spar, dimple the skin, impossible at this point. So I just cut out the little portion of the fairing to go around that rivet here and here. I wish I had them in place to show you what I'm talking about, but I don't. That's it for the long form. I sure appreciate you guys the most. You're probably builders, so you might have questions or comments or, hey, suggestions on how I can do things better. There's a lot that you guys have backed me up on. I've gone back and fixed things, so I sure appreciate you guys looking over my shoulder. That's awesome. I'm humbled, and I by no means have ever meant to give instruction. I do give tips or things that I've learned, but take that, you know, as a grain of salt. I am a first-time builder. I'm not an expert. I know you guys know that, but it bears repeating. It's important. But until next time, you're cleared direct.